for our panel number 2, which is Modern Asian Motherhood. Motherhood, the toughest job in the world for sure. So we have 3 great, is it 3 or 4? No, we have 4 great panelists for this next panel. And so we'll just give it another minute until everyone has a seat, and then we'll get started. Who was here for panel number 1? A couple of you, yeah. That was very powerful, wasn't it? Yeah. It's always great to see, especially, again, it's the Asian story of, I was a young Asian girl growing up in Ohio in the 1970s, so imagine that. Interesting experience. But I was your typical Asian girl who didn't speak up, didn't say anything. My teachers in my report card would always say, May's a good listener, meaning I didn't speak. And so, we're kind of programmed that way for a long time, as kids. Maybe not so much now, but back then, definitely. And then that programming, unless you're willing to break that programming and reprogram yourself, you kind of remain that way. But it's great to see such powerful women break out of that shell, break down that stereotype, and do these things that they're doing to make the world a better place, especially out of their pain. So, but next, again, like I said, it's all about Asian motherhood. And the moderator is Karen Chu, who is one of the co-founders of Asians Are Strong. So take it away, Karen.
One of our guests, but I will kill some dead air here. Hello, my name is Karen. I'm one of the co-founders of Asians Are Strong, and I'm really, really pumped and really honored to be on this panel. Quick hands up. Who's a parent? Oh, okay. Well, so please, on the count of 3, can you say with me, you're doing amazing? 1, 2, 3. You're doing amazing! Yay! Awesome. Well, let's see someone. She's running.
Oh, there she is.
So, very quickly, so I was lobbying for a WWE wrestler entrance for all of our panels because they're also very amazing, but we didn't have that for the budget. So I guess you have to settle with me with their intro. So I'm going to introduce our panel of super moms today. Let's do, first up, Angela, please. Angela Wu, architect and also the mom and manager of Ashlyn, whose work you can see out in the lobby there. And then next up we have Tsai, head of community engagement in the community group Moms in Tech. And then we have Joanna Ho, New York Times bestselling author and educator. And then lastly we have Elenor Mack, who is the CEO and founder of Jilly Bean. Would you ladies go down the line and just say a little bit more about yourself? So Angela, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So I have 2 jobs, like most moms. I'm an architect. I, run the West Coast office of our architecture firm out here. But my other job is actually being a momager, an agent for my daughter, who's a fashion designer and an activist. So my job is really just to support her and help her do whatever she needs. I'm also a chauffeur, so.
Yeah. I feel like chauffeur is a big part of the job. Hi, my name is Tsai. My day job is I'm the chief operating officer for a software company called Interact. For the last 6 years, I've been working with an amazing team to grow a community called Moms in Tech. It's momsintech.com. Thank you. We're about almost 19,000 operators and executives who identify as mothers. We're global, and we are the support system that I didn't have for a long time.
Is this on now? Okay. I'm Julian Ho. So my day job used to be in education. I was a high school English teacher. I, up until pretty recently, was the vice principal of a high school in East Palo Alto. And I have left that mostly, and I write full-time now. So I write picture books and young adult novels for kids. And I have 2 kids. They're 6 and they're 9.
Hi, I'm Elenor. In some circles, I've become known as the the doll lady. And I probably wear that title along with being the founder of Jilly, the first authentic Asian American doll, because our children deserve dolls that look like them. I am a native New Yorker, proud mom to 2 young kids who will hopefully be here later this afternoon. My son's James, who's 6, and OG Jilly, my little daughter, who's Jillian, 4 years old.
Woo! Give it up. All right. Well, I want to start this off with a little bit of an icebreaker, a little bit of drama. I want to know what keeps you up at night. We'll start with you, Elenor.
All right. So funny, I was thinking about that question last night after dinner, and as I was thinking about it, I couldn't sleep. I started thinking about it. Like, what keeps me up at night? And then I started thinking all those things, and then I couldn't sleep for a while. I think for me, it was around, so growing up in New York, my parents were they were immigrants from Hong Kong. And so growing up, I was really shy. But my mom, she was this very sassy, outspoken, she still is. But when she immigrated here to the US, she lost her identity and she lost her voice because she didn't speak the language. And she used to make me do this thing that I hated, which was speak up for her. Every time she felt like she got gypped at the cashier or she didn't get the order she wanted, she would make me go and, translate for her. And I just remember as a kid, I hated that so much. Like I was shy, it was uncomfortable. But now as an adult, I realized my mom gave me a voice. She taught me to have a voice. She empowered me to speak up. And so I think about, for my daughter and the next generation, how do I transfer this to her, right? I don't have the same struggles that my mom did. I think, my kids are much more well adapted to American society. So I think a lot about how do I make sure I instill that same sense of activism or the ability to speak up, to have your voice for my children. And, there are things we do well, and there are things where we're really still trying to figure out as a family to make sure that my little girl and my little boy learn to speak up for themselves, the value of being sort of, the agent of change you want.
Love that. I really, truthfully, totally honestly, what keeps me up at night is genocide that's happening in Gaza. And I think about it all the time. I'm watching the news. I've been just studying history and learning all this history that I didn't know before. And how that relates to motherhood is just, I look at the world and I look at what's happening in the world and I wonder about the kind of world that we're allowing to develop for our children and the kind of world that we could develop and that we could build for our kids. And at this moment in time, which is if you understand history, and we'll get into it more later. I'm a storyteller, and for a reason, because Michelle, if you were here for the panel just before, the power of understanding our stories and our history and the very intentional erasure of our stories and our history is something that impacts people who have been marginalized all over the world. And there's a really specific reason. It helps people to stay in power who've always stayed in power. And you can see that playing out. And I think about what I didn't know when I was growing up, the conversations we never had. So much of our culture, whether we're talking about our feelings or we're talking about what's happening in the world, there's just so much silence oftentimes. And I find that the more that I've learned about Asian American history, the more I understand that we've always spoken up and fought back, and we've always fought back and taken up space. So how that relates in context to myself as a mom, I feel like when I see what's happening in the world, I'm making very conscious decisions to talk to my kids about what's happening and giving them and helping them know that they, even though they're 6 and they're 9, they have a responsibility to know and that they also have the power to take action.
Amy?
So what I think about a lot is how different the world is. The world that my kids are growing up in. I have a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old. Brendan's in the audience. Hi. The world that they're growing up in, the tools that they have access to, the information, the onslaught of information that they have access to is so different than the world that I grew up in, the world that my parents grew up in. And a lot of times I feel unequipped to help them navigate through that. And it really gives me a lot of anxiety. And so for a long time, we said no social media. We're just gonna no internet. Hi, baby. And,
Special guest.
Motherhood, yes.
Oh, you good. Glad you made it.
Don't be sorry. This is a
Sorry,
panel
Annie.
about
Did you have
motherhood.
that? Did you have that mane to match her, or did you make the doll outfit to match her? Free marketing. It's really cute. So for a long time, we just didn't allow social media for our kids on platforms just as a way to sort of avoid the situation. And we're at a place now where we can no longer avoid it. And I'm really trying to think about how to thoughtfully, open up this huge world. It's just something I think about a lot.
I'm a really sound sleeper.
Jealous.
No. But like what does keep me up at night is that I have this fear I'm gonna lose my kids. Like, I don't know, I guess I was a sound sleeper until I had kids, where you have to like wake up every 3 hours and feed and you're like, oh my God. But I think it partially comes from like how I grew up and that there's this fear, right, that's in me. And it's constantly like, oh my gosh, losing my kids is gonna be the worst thing in the whole world. So that's kind of consistent. So for me, being a mother is a learning experience, right? You talked about like, there's no manual, we don't know what to do, no idea. So you kind of learn with your kids. Unfortunately, with your first kid, you kind of like make your mistake with your first kid too, And it's like, sorry, she's right there. I'm like, sorry, I made some mistakes. But I think it's really learning with them, recognizing things that you've done wrong. Like, she knows I say sorry to her. I was like, I'm sorry, like I did X, Y, Z. I made you like really anxious, I recognize that I'm learning, I'm trying to change. And I think the kids could see like the things that you can work on yourself and help you change and help kind of the whole family dynamic and everything else kind of get better. So I learn from my kids every day. So.
I totally can relate. Like, I grew up being a pretty goth kid and a goth teenager, and I've never thought about death as much as when I first had my first kid. I was like, all of a sudden, it's like, ugh, like I think about death all the time. Well, so we're talking about modern motherhood, but really we have to address our past and our kind of past generations and all the behaviors, the traits, the cultures, the things that gets passed down from generations to generations and then to us. So I want to know, you guys have all done something that defied kind of cultural expectations. What are some of the things that you're like, no, the cycle ends with me. I'm going to break this cycle. I'm going to start with Joanna because you're an educator and you've broken so many boundaries. Like, what's the cycle that you're like, I'm going to break this time for me and my kids?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it in my previous answer. It's just the cycle of silence. And there's so much I don't know about my own parents, my biological dad, my stepdad, my mom. I don't know their stories, and it wasn't until after I started to write books that I started to do my own research into Asian American history, into my own family history. I went to Taiwan this last summer, and I saw pictures of my mom as a kid for the first time. I've never seen them before. I mean, there's just so much I don't know, and that's across everything. The way that we love and we show through our action, we don't always share that. Or the way that we're proud, but we say it by insulting each other. I don't know, like there's things that I just think that I want to make sure that I have communication with my kids about everything, about what's happening in the world, about what's happening in their lives. And I also want to be really clear. Like, my kids are annoyed when I say, I love you, I love you, right? They're like, I know, Mom, But like, I'm like, when I was a teenager, there was one day I called my mom on the phone, and I just randomly, and I was like, Ma, I just want to tell you I love you. And do you know what she did? She called me back like 5 minutes later and was like, what's wrong? Are you okay? Are you about to commit suicide? And I was like, whoa, like that is a problem. Like, it's funny now, but in the moment I was like, Ma, I think there's a problem if that was your reaction, and so there's like things like communicating the love and the appreciation, but also talking about all the things we think are hard but are so important to talk to our kids about because they need the tools. They're experiencing all the things. That's why I write the stories that I write, because I want kids to have that conversation about all the things.
And Angela, that's kind of related, for you to be such a strong supporter of your daughter and her like artistic endeavors. That's not really a traditional kind of hobby to get into, nor is it traditionally with our generation, it's kind of like art. What's that? And so how were you like, no, this is the cycle I'm gonna break?
Well, I think I'm pretty lucky compared to other Asian parents. My parents are very liberal from that sense. They always say, I just want you to be happy. You're not like robbing a bank and murdering people. I'm okay, right? So they actually named me Angela because of angel, and then my Chinese name means happy. So that's kind of, like they set up some really good like goals for me.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is they also realize that I'm a very different child. I said I love you. So I'm a first generation immigrant. I immigrated from Hong Kong when I was little. I came here when I was little, and I would like send my parents notes. I would like write cards, draw cards, tons of hearts, and like say I love you, and I like slip it under their door like every week, right? Every Sunday. It's like I do that, and my parents are like, oh my gosh, what child do we have that shows love? Where did she learn that from? And, granted, they don't say it every day, but now, my mom does. We've broken her down. But I think that expression of love and care is really important. So I said I'm a very different child because my family is also mostly engineers. They're great at math. Like my brother is like #1 in all of his classes since he was grade 1. And my parents knew if they compare me to him, I'll be dead, right? That's my older brother, right? Like I would wilt, I would not be anyone. They're like, she likes drawing. We don't know what to do with her, but, just don't put her in like too academically challenging schools. So it's all those things, right, that they recognize and they help me set up for my success, even though they don't know what to do, because I wanted to be an architect, right? I actually wanted to do design. Anything design, I'm good with. And so finally, when I came to architecture, I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't know I need to prepare for like a portfolio and all this work. So my job when I became a parent, when Ashlyn told me that she wanted to sew, I overcame my fear of like needles, hitting her fingers when she was 6. To the fact that I thought, okay, she wanted something graphic and artistic, right? It's outside of the realm of what my parents knew, but now I know better. I know better how to prepare her. And that's actually how, all this stuff starts. I like obsessively take pictures of all of her work and comes now today. So I still obsessively take pictures of her work.
We all do. Thank you, smartphones. Parenthood forever. And Elenor, you broke the cycle because you saw a problem in representation. And what is the kind of inspiration of your like, I'm gonna be the one to make an Asian doll, a toy?
Yeah, so I grew up in the 80s, in New York, in a predominantly non-Asian community. And I remember, I think many people face stereotypes, but I think especially Asian American females, we've always been told who we're supposed to be, right? You're supposed to be demure, dainty, shy, good at math, bad at sports, right? And all I'm sure I'm terrible at math, I'm decent at sports, but you grew up with all these stereotypes. And then also I just remember, always feeling like, it was like I wanted to be cool like the blonde girls, right? Like I never felt good about me being Asian. I was always like, I would try to perm my hair so it looked wavy like the Caucasian girls. And it's a lot of my childhood. I remember feeling, sort of like pigeonholed to be someone, but also not feeling like I was good enough as who I am. And so, fast forward 40 years, I'm a mom.
You have some hecklers in the front. People can't see, but
and and I look at my daughter, and she. This wasn't planned. But Jilly started playing with dolls when she was a little over 2 years old, And I think seeing Jilly play with dolls, and I think a doll is so much more than just a toy in passing, right? I remember growing up as an only child, my parents were working parents, and so my doll was my best friend.
Yeah.
It was my definition of what's beautiful, the standard of beauty, right? I still remember wishing I had blonde hair, blue eyes, because that's what my doll Ada looked like. I would cut her hair so I would look like her. And for me, I wanted a different narrative for children like my daughter, right? I wanted her to know that she's beautiful as she is. She's beautiful with her black hair and her, eyes that kiss in the corner. And I think for me, that was what, when I went into the toy stores here in San Francisco, thinking I would find a doll that looked like an Asian child in the year 2022. And what I found were either it didn't exist or it was stereotypes. These dolls with, really bad haircut, holding a panda bear, because, we all have pandas in our backyard. Wearing a sheep paw. And it was always the doll on the side. It was the sidekick character. And I think for me, it was just that mama bear instinct of, our children deserve a better story. Our children deserve a doll that looks like them. Our children deserve to know that they belong in the story. They're the center of the story. And so, my proudest moment is when Jilly, looks at that doll's eyes and she notices the doll's eyes are like her. And, it's something I never had growing up.
Oh, fan club over there. And Annie?
My parents were also very, I guess I grew up during this, we call them latchkey kid generation,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah, Gen
latchkey,
Xers.
yep.
And so I didn't see them a lot of time until dinner time or when it was time to go to school. We were alone most of the time, my sister and I, who was 4 years older than I. And so we had to figure out a lot of things for ourselves. And as I think about generational trauma, I think about the trauma that the community instilled on us as Asian first-generation immigrants. And we grew up in the Bay Area, in the greater Bay Area, but it was still a predominantly white community. And you didn't speak up, because if you spoke up, if you were really extroverted, then you were going to be targeted. And that was the case 30, 35 years ago. I see a lot of nodding, and it was a very real thing. And it wasn't necessarily, a situation where you were going to get jumped or something like that, but there was a lot of bullying going on. So we really grew up, especially as an Asian woman, we really grew up believing that we had to keep our head down, do our work, and someone one day would notice, and we would eventually get the promotion. And that's not a world that I think anybody should grow up in, and that's not a world that I think anybody should be living in, frankly. So most of my 20s and 30s, I was very often the only female executive in the room, the only female on the sales team, the only female, traveling to these meetings with other potential clients. And I just had to get used to speaking the language of all the men in the room. And what was really interesting was I really lost a lot of myself. I lost a lot of my femininity. I lost a lot of my Asianness, because I was replicating what I was seeing as successful behavior around me. And it wasn't until I think my son was probably like 6 or 7 or something like that, where I started working at a company where I had the opportunity to actually start building policy and making decisions around the type of company that we wanted to be and the type of culture that we wanted to have, that it became empowering, that I was able to kind of embrace the fact that I was an Asian woman who was a leader at a company, and the fact that we could create a company that other minorities or people of color or anybody, a woman or a man or however you identify, could find success, but their entire identity was not going to be in their professional careers. They were going to be people outside of that, and that became really important to me as well. And so as I think about what's next for this upcoming generation, that's everything that I put my energy into.
Wow, amazing. And it also just, not only are you guys moms, but you all are very, successful business people. Even an author. We have like a CEO of companies, an architect, being in like these professions. And in your eyes, what are some of the ways that the workplace can help support moms? I mean, there are a lot of ways, and but like, what are for you to see it there? What's something that you feel like should companies be doing, or the workplace?
I can start.
Go ahead.
That would be from our architecture world. So it's also a very male-dominant world, and I totally resonate with you when you said, to be successful, all of a sudden you have to emulate like this guy who, you know, would not listen to anyone else. I'm over exaggerating, but just kind of like the character that is not you anymore. You know, I want to be me. I want to build a team that surrounds equality, equity, right? Listening to everyone, and so I think that the support, you know, that companies should have, other than, you know, maternity leave and all that stuff, which is, to me, it's like a checkbox, right? But it's really what happened when you go back.
Yep.
Do you get your team back? Do you get your projects back? Do you get your clients back? Do they have the same respect for you when you go back? Or do you feel like you have to start from zero again? So, and I think the starting from zero is the hardest. So every time we take 3 months off, 6 months off, 9 months off, right? I took time for both my kids, and I took time when my dad was sick. And I feel like I had to restart my career. And it's like people forgot. And it's like, what happened? You know, women shouldn't have to restart just because we want to take care of our kids. We want to take care of our parents, right? And I think until the leadership changes,
Yeah.
and there's more diversity and more gender diversity as well, it's going to be really hard for companies to be able to understand and truly, truly support women who are moms or family to take care of.
Yeah.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. There are two things that I think everyone in this room, like, go home and you have a responsibility to do this. Me too. The number one is we need to talk about parental leave as something that the birthing mother and the co-parent equally deserve, 100%. Because there should be no expectation that, you know, your partner should be going back to work after 2 weeks. And that happens every day in this country, as the only first world nation or developed nation, whatever you want to call it these days, that has, you know, basically no parental leave, no federal standard for parental leave, just job security after a year of employment, which is also ridiculous. That's number one, right? We need to stop talking about parental leave as if it's a gift and something that not everybody needs to take, because everybody needs to take it, and we should take it equally. The second thing that I think companies, everybody in this room can support, and we did it at our company, we were able to figure it out, is the more we can be flexible with our employees and enable flexible work arrangements, flexible schedules, 4-day work week, whatever it is, the easier it'll be for parents to be able to have really challenging and gratifying long careers without feeling like they're making a choice between being a great parent and a successful working professional. I think we can have both, and I think that it's very possible, but there's a system in place in this country that does not enable it. It's very hard to do that. And every day, you know, working moms, especially working moms, feel like they're making that choice. Am I going to be a good mom today, or am I going to be great at my job today? And you shouldn't have to make that choice.
That's surreal.
I agree with everything that's been shared. I think it's really hard to answer this question without examining the systems that we live in. Mm-hmm. It's hard to talk about the workplace if you're not talking about healthcare, if you're not talking about what's happening in our politics. Because within the cultural understanding of what it means to be a mom and what we value and who we value and what kind of work we value. So I 100% agree. Paid family leave, like more time. I'm a single mom. Both of my kids went to daycare when they were 8 weeks old, because I had to make money for my family. And so I just think within our conversation, it's not just about the workplace, it's about the system as a whole. What kind of healthcare do we get? Like, I have back problems because my body's all messed up, but like, I got one checkup, after I had a baby, and nobody tells you and nobody takes care of your body. And that matters when you're trying to be productive as a mom, when you're trying to be productive in your workplace. What happens when we talk about how we value the work of the home and whether we even consider that work and whether we put value on it or if it's just something that's supposed to magically happen. So I think it's hard to answer. There are like very concrete things like flexible work, and they seem very basic, but they don't exist now. Like as an educator, it was always about whose kids am I taking care of today? Am I taking care of my kids or I'm going to take care of other people's kids? And that became a question that I couldn't answer enough, because if you know anything about education, it is a 24/7 job. I work in Title I schools always. That's where my heart is. And there's so much need. There's no resources. So all of the systems are connected, and you can't talk about one without talking about the others. And so I know that's like a non-answer, but that's where my brain is all the time. Like, how do we dismantle these systems so that all of us are more liberated to live the lives that make us whole?
I have this visual image. My husband's not here, so I'll say this and truly mean it. My husband is a non-emotional Asian man. Not very, emotive. But he's a physician. He manages clinical trials at biotech. But he views the caring of the family as a 50-50. It is not on Elenor. It is, it's. And there was a day he was on a conference call with, his team, with his CMO, who's also an Asian female. But in the middle of it, my daughter was crying, I was trying to take care of something, and he just grabs her and sits on that screen and is holding his daughter. And he's trying to have this conversation, but he's like, my daughter's sick, I gotta help out. I just, afterwards, some of his colleagues pinged him, was like, that was really powerful to see that. Just to see a man really kind of getting up there and taking care of the kids and owning childcare as if it's his responsibility just as well, right? There was no hiding from that. And I agree with you, right? There's all the workplaces, but there's also the family. I say this, I couldn't do Jilly Bing. I couldn't run a business, raise 2 kids, do some consulting work to pay for the job if my husband didn't give me his full support, right? Yeah. If he didn't, it's funny. So, both of us come from more traditional Asian families, and for the first year of Jilly Bing, neither his father, my father-in-law, nor my father knew about Jilly Bing, because we knew it would cause concern. It would cause questions about the unit of the family, who's going to care for the kids, with the mom trying to start a business. But I had the support of my husband, the support that, I take your job, your mission, your passion with the same seriousness as his career. So, I think for me, it was having a partner who really kind of behind the scenes was really just, in it as much as. And I say that he's not here, so I hope this is being video.
I did say something nice.
But really, I think having that internal support in my family was really it helped us be where we are today.
Well, that leads to my next question, which is, with motherhood, it's not like, oh, I'm signing up for motherhood, here's your baby. It all of a sudden becomes a household. You have you have domestic duties, you have responsibilities, and cultural expectations play so huge in managing the household. And so, is this something? I mean, I ask this, is this something you struggle with? Obviously, we all struggle with it. But, what are ways, Elenor, you said 50-50, what are some ways that family members and partners could alleviate that load, that domestic load that we kind of take on into ourselves?
I'll just jump in really fast.
Yeah.
I don't have a partner anymore because he was not a partner, so that's a whole other story. But for me, actually, just backtracking a little bit, my first book came out in January of 2021, so it's right in the middle of the pandemic. Since then, there have been 7 others, but that book hit the New York Times bestseller list the week it came out, and it was such a dream, so unexpected. At the same time, I was going through a divorce, and I was leading a school in the middle of a pandemic, so it was sort of like my world was imploding, and then there was this beautiful thing happening, but it felt like it was happening outside of my real life because I couldn't go anywhere. I never met readers. Everything was virtual, so I'd get all this good news, and it'd be like, yay, New York Times, but now I have to go handle this school where people, in my community where people are dying, And to kind of bring it back full circle to that first question about what are we changing, I also became very close to my mom. We did not have a great relationship growing up for all the reasons Asian moms and daughters, or any moms and daughters, or, you know, it was really hard. We lived and we had different philosophies. And my community, you know, my family came through for me. Like, I hit the wall for the first time in my life where I realized I can't do the things I need to do. Like, I've always been someone who is like, yes, give that to me. Yes, give that to me. I'll take it. I can do it. I can add to my plate. And I hit the wall in that 3-year period when I couldn't. I just was at capacity times 10,000. And my mom and my stepdad, they watched my kids. They would make me food. They would like come over and fill my fridge with food. And things like that where my friends, I think that like things like events like this where we remember we have a community, because so much of motherhood and working, you're just in your zone. Like, you're surviving the day-to-day in your bubble, and you don't realize how much you need everyone else. And I think my wish would be that we shift the culture of what it means to be a parent here. It's not just the nuclear family, it's all of our communities, our extended families, our chosen families, and they are the ones who, to this day, I mean, I can't do what I'm doing without the support of all the people around me, which includes events like this, honestly.
Yeah, I want to second kind of what you're saying, right? Like, it takes a village. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and I wanted to go back a little bit on like the workplace thing. Yeah. I think it also takes your workplace to be in partnership of raising children. Yeah. You know, if you think back to villages and things like that, everyone works together to take care of the kids. Like, why are we segregating that now? So for myself, you know, my husband has a very similar story. He's also an immigrant from Hong Kong. And pretty soon I realized, okay, wait, I have a list of things that I need to do at work. And I have another list in my head of things that I need to do at home. And I'm like going crazy with these two lists. And then meanwhile, my husband was just kind of like doing his own thing. And I was just like, okay, something's wrong. I know he comes from a good place. What is wrong? And then I realized, oh, I just assign him lists, just like I do at work. This is yours, this is mine, you know? And then all of a sudden, he does it, right? So it's kind of like, oh, he just needs to be told. Somehow he wants to turn off his brain when he comes home. So, all right, I'll turn mine on the whole time. But, you know, that's how it works. Like, whatever that works for you, and trying to get through it, right? And then as the kids get older, then the dads sort of realize that they can also contribute more. Like, I think that when they were young, he said he has no idea. Like, my kids need me, but like, they don't need me, they need you. So then, you know, they're like, they still cry, but then once they're on your hands, then they stop crying. Like, what am I supposed to do, you know? So I think it's just like working with your partner, finding their points where they can excel at. And just like, okay, these are your chores, these are mine, you know, we divide and we can get this done. Of course, you know, I have my parents who are constantly there to help us, so we're very fortunate about that. But it really does take a whole village to get it to work.
Yeah.
I think for me, some of that is my own, what I didn't realize, my own internal, you know, kind of expectations of what it means to be an Asian mother, an Asian wife, right? You know, recently, you know, these, you know, similar to we were in this moment where we launched the doll, we had all the stuff, all the great stuff happening, but you also have 2 young kids to watch. So we flew my mom over from New York to help watch the kids. Then, you know, unfortunately, my mom had this health issue that landed, and we just suddenly, it was like we had 3 kids in the house. Plus, you know, it was right before the holiday season, so like, you know, my business was taking off, and I just felt so overstretched. I couldn't, you know, I still tried to make dinner, and I was like, you know, the idea, you know, what we ended up doing, and it required a lot of me to say, it's okay, Elenor, it's okay that your husband's the better cook. It's okay, your kids are like, whenever you cook, your kids are like, I'm not that hungry, Mom. I felt so much guilt, because I'm like, I should cook for my kids, right? I should have to cook for the kids. You know, we ended up getting my mom a homemade, which was a very difficult decision, right? I think for me to be able to relate, you know, I felt so bad to not be able to be the person to take care of my mom, to help her shower, to do all that stuff. But I think it was just realizing it's okay. Like, you know, and I try to have the conversations with my mom where it's like, I still love you. You know, please don't think I'm a bad daughter. And she's like, I don't. You know, and I just felt like a lot of it was my own internal expectation of what's expected of me, right?
Yeah.
As a mom, as an Asian, you know, as a daughter, as, you know, just those expectations. And I think I'm still trying to figure out, like, okay, it's okay that I can't help very well. It's okay that, you know, we brought someone to help my mom. And just letting go of those sort of demands you're making of yourself, just giving yourself a little grace to be human and pursue something you love that may not fit the bill of, you know, being a traditional Asian mom.
And Annie, this is like a very hot topic in mom.
So hot. Every day.
Topic. And you know, and people have to. You know, I'm glad that you guys are sharing the different ways that you can approach this. And so Annie, what you know, from all the questions in Moms in Tech asking about this kind of stuff, what's kind of the top key like takeaways that you could share with us?
Oh gosh. I think the number one piece of advice that moms give each other, especially like dual income working households or, you know, single moms that are raising their kids while working full time, is outsource and ask for help.
Yep.
Don't be shy about it. If you can afford it, if you can afford to ask for help and get help, do it. No one is going to blame you for hiring someone to come and clean your drapes, you know, or no one, or the toilet or whatever. No one's gonna like get mad at you if you hire someone to stock your fridge. They're going to celebrate the fact that you know what your time is worth, and they know that an hour of doing house chores versus an hour of spending time with your kids, what are your kids gonna remember 25 years from now? They're gonna remember the hour that you sat down and, you know, drew funny faces with them. But if you work on cleaning your house instead, they're going to remember that you didn't sit down with them for an hour and instead wanted to do the dishes. And so, you know, those are the trade-offs. And time is finite. And so if we can, take the help. And, you know, just as a personal note, it was, I hear a lot of moms talk about, you know, the sort of the inequity of household distribution, the distribution of work. And, you know, similar, just echoing what Elenor said, I feel very, very fortunate that my husband is really, really proactive. He actually is, I would say, like the more sort of nurturing and loving father. And, you know, when my kids were really, really young, like 0 to 2, like I just didn't know what to do. I was like, I don't know. I'm giving them, you know, I'm like touching them and I'm holding them and they keep crying and I don't know what to do. And he was just so great with them, so great. You know, and I was, you know, I had a really hard time with nursing, and so I was like off in the closet, like trying to pump all the time while he was feeding the baby and bonding with baby and all of that. And so it was really hard in the beginning to see him have that skill set with my first. And then when my second rolled around 7 years later, I really appreciated it because by that time I was old enough and I think hopefully wise enough to realize that that was something I was just not going to be good at. And, you know, that's just another way that I came to realize that it was asking for help and receiving it and being like sort of gracious about receiving it is a good thing.
There was a really great point in the last panel about mental health, and I think we're living in an age where like mental health and also like neurodivergence and all of this stuff is like now we're so much more knowledgeable about this than when we were kids and our, you know, and in generations before us. You know, how has that kind of awareness changed your or shifted your kind of parental approach?
I'm very open about it only because, so my philosophy about motherhood is you're there to guide your children. You try to give them as many choices as possible so they're exposed to as many things as possible. And it's hopefully that they find the one thing that they're passionate about. That's the thing. That's where life is worth living for. And I feel like that's my job as a parent to help them with that. And with that thinking, I know that it's also a lot of pressure to be like first kid versus the next kid. And, you know, just trying to recognize that as a parent, sometimes kids don't want to tell you things.
Yeah.
and you just need the third person. And the third person, therapist, counselor, whatever, right? There's a confidentiality that they understand your parents will never find out because they might think the other, like they might think wrongly, like, oh, I don't love my parents, so that's why I think I don't like the way that she does this or he does this, right? So there's a safe place. I mean, and it took me a while to understand that because I grew up, right, in Hong Kong, and it's all about like, you don't ever talk to a therapist. What are you talking about? You don't air out your family business to other people. Come on. Maybe talk to your parents, maybe talk to your sibling who may or may not give you the right advice. Talk to your friends, same way, right? Like they're like your same age. How are they supposed to know better? And so you just don't talk and you're like, just suck it up and keep going, right? So granted, that gave me grit, right? And that gave me just the tenacity to keep going. That is not very healthy. So when it comes to my kids and recognizing those things, I think is one. And two, don't think that it's your failure that your kids need to seek mental health. Yeah. I thought about that all the time, and then I have to tell myself that, no, don't think about that. Because if you think about that, then you're stopping your kid from progressing. You're stopping your kid from working out whatever it is in their minds that they couldn't untie and unknot. And so some of the therapists were telling me, I'm not here to solve your problem, right? I'm here to help you cope with it. Like, what are some of the mechanisms, the exercises, or different ways of thinking that can help you get through certain things and maybe see it from a different angle? And so I think that it's really, really important, and I'm glad that people are finally recognizing it because it's invisible. We all walk around with something and people can't see it. If you're like crippled, like your leg, it's obvious, right? You can see it. But if you're struggling with something, they can't see it. And I think that's the thing that we need to kind of get over and understand and help our kids move forward because that you don't want them to go deeper. So the other thing I want to say is it could get worse, right? And what I've heard is teenagers, their brains are still learning, absorbing, and social media is so heavy with stuff that may or may not be right for our kids. So we have to be careful of that and help them get through it. So before they get into that hole, that deep, deep black hole, pull them out because once you're in there, then you're on medication forever. And I didn't want that for my kids. So recognizing that would be really important and trying to convince them and seek help and convince yourself that you are still a good parent because you love them. I think that's also another thing.
Yeah.
Great point. Well, I want to make sure we have Q&A, so I have a couple last few questions.
Can I jump in on that one really fast?
Please.
Just super quickly. I moved around a lot when I was a kid, and I moved to Palo Alto. We lived with an aunt. I went to high school in Palo Alto, and after I graduated is when the suicide epidemics happened in Palo Alto. My novel is about that, actually. And I also have a child who is on medication. He's neurodivergent. He struggles with really debilitating anxiety, and he's 9. And I also work as an educator in the high schools where I see what happens when you have learning disabilities or you have mental health issues that have been unresolved or unaddressed or unsupported, and I see what that trajectory looks like. And so the one thing I would just say is I think oftentimes, not just in our community, I think it's prevalent across the board, but a learning disability or a mental health issue, we all should be seeing therapists if we can afford it, honestly. I think about, this is what my kid's therapist told me. I've been wearing glasses since I was 9, since I was in 3rd grade. I have really bad vision. If someone was no, you should just suck it up and try to see, you don't need glasses, figure it out on your own, just be tougher. I would be dead because I can't see and I wouldn't be able to drive. It's just that kind of thing. It is taking care of your health. There is no shame in learning differently and having a brain that functions so beautifully in a way that our society is not often designed particularly schools for people who are neurodivergent, but they are brilliant people. And that level, that like stigma or the shame is something I wish we could take away. Like if you need medication because you can't focus and your doctor thinks it's something helpful, take the dang medication. If you need an IEP because learning school is not structured for you, it's not about like he just needs to try harder, he's being lazy. Like his brain is not functioning in a certain way, or her brain or their brain. Like it's okay, and it's a beautiful thing that I feel like we should embrace and not be ashamed of. Like I still see that so much in parents, even in my generation, who are like, oh, we don't want to get him tested. We know there's something wrong, not wrong, there's something different and he's struggling, but it's okay, we'll just like give him more tutors.
It's a phase.
You know? Yeah, it's a
phase.
phase.
It's
He has
a
to work
phase,
harder.
yeah.
He just has to focus. Like, I wish that we could just embrace that we are all built differently and our brains function differently, and it's a beautiful thing. And let's get each other the support that we need so that we can maximize the like potential that we've all been given.
Yeah, and for us to communicate that too, I have a special needs child, one of my daughters, and she just got her IEP, and it was so difficult to tell this to my parents, to explain to them. They're just like, oh yeah, they'll get over it, and it's like,
No.
what if they don't?
Yeah.
You know, and there are all these programs in place that are available that you can lend a hand, you can help them and help guide them. So I do have, we are running short of time. Last question for all of you. Earlier we talked about the cycles we want to break. I want to know what are some of the things that you want to continue, so things that you've learned from your parents and previous generations. What's something that you want to pass on to your kids? Elenor.
I think pass on to my kids. I think it's where I started my sort of, with my mom, seeing her struggle and her forcing me to get out of my comfort zone, right? For me to speak up on her. I want my children, part of starting this company was about having a doll. But, I hope in that, today was really important that I had my kids here because I want them to see mommy working, right? I want them to know that, mommy's not just, the one who chauffeurs them or makes them breakfast, right? I'm that too, but I want them to know what's possible. And so I think really just kind of letting my children know what's possible for them.
I think one thing I would just throw is, I talked about my mom a lot. Like, I know my mom is gonna be there for me no matter what. If you've ever read that book, Dial A for Aunties, it's like really funny. It's a girl who accidentally murders the blind date her mom set her up on, and then she calls her mom and her aunties come through. And they like try to, it's just, and I was reading it and I was like, my mom would definitely do that for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just know, and I think knowing whatever all the communication things or the belief systems, like I know my mom is like ride or die, and no matter what happens, she's gonna have my back. And I think knowing that I have that allows me to take risks, like write and quit my job to be an author, like knowing that my mom has my back always. And I hope that my kids know that they have a mom in a community that will always be there to support them and love them so hard the way I think so many of our families love us hard.
That's awesome. I'm really, really lucky that my parents didn't force me to be who they wanted me to be. They didn't have some preconceived notion that I should be an engineer or a lawyer or whatever, right? Or whatever they say. And a lot of my friends, frankly, growing up in that time in the 80s and 90s, they had those parents. I'm sure we all had friends with those parents. And I felt really lucky because I wanted to be artistic. I wanted to, do things that seemed very non sequitur, and they just really supported me in that. And that's something that, as a part of our family, I think is just really, really special. And I hope that my kids feel that their entire lives. Whatever they want to be, whoever they want to be, we're going to be there for them. And I hope they pass that on to their kids too.
Yeah, I think that partnership, my parents talk about tough love all the time. I hate that word. I'm like, just love, okay, please. And I think it's their way of the cultural, burden and pressure of not being able to say I love you and love and all that in its purest form. So they put like tough on it. But I know that they have my back, right? Like I became an architect not because they said, you should be an engineer like your brother or whatever, like myself. But they're like, okay, that's what you want to be. Okay, well, maybe you should speak to that person, right? So that the support is really important. And I think that family values, right?
Yeah.
Family gatherings, we're all one ginormous unit. We're not self, right? And that we all have each other's back. Yeah. There are times that we might like fade out because life happens and then just fade back in, right? You know that there are times that we're always there for each other, good times, bad times. And I think those kind of family values, traditions are things that I think is really valuable here. And I miss it when, I had a huge family when I was in Hong Kong, right? Like I had 11 cousins, aunts and aunties, But I think is that knowing that somebody will have your back, the aunties, your cousin, your uncle, whoever, right? Your parents. I think that's important. And we ourselves are actually partners of our kids, right? Like we help them. They say they want to do this. Okay, I'm going to open the door. I'm going to help you. But you're the one responsible for going through because I don't want to push you, right? As soon as the moment that I push you through forcibly, that is not your passion, and I've failed, like myself, right? I failed as their mom. So that's kind of the things that I want is like that family tradition. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to share my answer with this. My mom thinks I'm interesting. And growing up, all the weird hobbies or the weird music, it's like screaming, she always described it as 有意思. Casually it translates to, it's like pretty interesting. But literally it translates to has meaning. It has intention and thought. That's literally what the characters mean. And so, and that's growing up hearing that all the time. And she would just say that to me, everything I did. And it's so beautiful to hear. It's almost like her saying, I see what you're doing, and I love that it has meaning. It's meaningful to you, whether if it's this or that, you're screaming music. And that's something that I really invite everybody to pass around all of them. It's I see what you're doing, and I love that it has meaning to you.
That's beautiful.
And with that, if you haven't cringed out of your skin and you're still with me, let's do a little bit of Q&A. Any questions for our illustrious panel here? Oh, I'm getting a note. Please announce the end. Yes. Quick news flash. So Joanna is doing a book signing right after this panel. So if you can check out all of her work, and that's going to be downstairs.
I think it's right over there. Somewhere.
Right over there. Yeah. Right outside.
We're at the standing booth.
Yeah, Eyes That Kiss the Corner and other works. But yeah, and any questions? Yes.
So, what is the most unexpected thing you've experienced about motherhood? Is there anything that surprised you?
I can go. I had heard all of these like horror stories about how like controlling your mom was going to be when you had a baby, and how there were like all these crazy traditions or whatever, and I didn't know if they were true or not, but I was kind of scared, and it's been so amazing how wonderful both my mom and my mother-in-law, my father-in-law and my dad, they're all very local in the Bay Area, and how wonderful they've been with both of our kids and my niece. And I don't think I could have survived any of this without that system in place, and I am going to be eternally grateful for my parents.
For me, for any of you who have two kids, you realize that, you raise them the same way, but they're so different.
Yeah.
So my son was easygoing, and I was like, I'm a great mom. I got this figured out. Then I have a daughter, and she beats, like she has her own drum beat. But for me, one of the things I'm still learning is my son is so emotional, so many feelings. And I see my parents saying, "You're a man, like don't have feelings, right?" Like the traditional like don't. And for me as a mom, it's really learning to navigate like some of my kind of growing up, my internal like whatever I've been taught, and unlearning them. And so when my son has lots of feelings, that I allow him to bring that to the table, and not to feel like mom will always support what what he's feeling, what he's thinking. And then versus my daughter, it's like
She's gonna do what
she's gonna do what she's gonna want to do, and so actually what keeps me up at night is when she's a teenager. I don't know how to handle that, but yeah, it's constantly changing.
I'll tell you two. One is I had a real identity struggle when I had my first child. I had identified for a very long time as an urban educator, changing systems, blah, blah, blah. And I also have always wanted to be a mom. And there was like probably a year or two where I really struggled with this idea of like, I'm a mom. And I felt like I had to give up this other identity that I had, and learning that you don't have to give up your identities, you're just adding more, and you can blossom in all the different ways that are not necessarily all happening at the same time, or they might be, and then you have to figure it out. So that was one, just like the identity navigation. I didn't realize it would be so hard. And then the other part, I think, more recently is just this idea that I'm trying to switch to, of realizing how often I subconsciously parent out of fear. And fear of what might happen to my kids, fear of what won't happen to my kids, fear of when they're teenagers and what they're going to be like if I don't do X, Y, and Z now. And worrying about my kids and trying to shift to a space of like seeing who they can be at their fullest, most resourced, beautiful selves, and parenting towards that instead of parenting away from something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for me, I think.
You have a teenager.
Yeah, I have two teenagers actually, and they're like polar opposite characters from each other. So what's most surprising for me is actually how much I've learned from my kids and how much they've helped me grow. And Ashlyn would hear me say this all the time. I don't know if she's still here, but she actually made me braver. When the Stop Asian Hate first started, I said, hey, we should do something. And I was expecting her to do like little things. And she goes, we should have a rally. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never been to a rally, unfortunately, in my entire life, let alone organize a rally. I was taught to put my head down and like just go forward. So she has like helped me learn a lot of new things.
Yeah.
And I think, that's from my daughter. And then for my son, it's sports. Like, he's a sports guy, right? Talk about divide and conquer. My husband does all the sports. I have no idea, no clue, and I do all the fashion stuff. And so, like, he taught me all the things about dinosaurs and sports and what teams. And I was like, oh, my God, this is amazing. And so I'm learning. So that's actually the most surprising thing for me, is that I'm learning so much from my kids. Like, truly. It's not just superficially saying it, and it's helping me be a better person.
Oh, that's beautiful. Annie, parting thought?
Oh gosh.
Surprising. So what surprised you?
Aside from how wonderfully supportive my parents have been, is how much stronger the relationship between my husband and I got once we started having kids, because your true colors come out at 2-3 in the morning when you haven't slept for 36 hours and I can't make milk and the baby poops on the ceiling and I probably haven't showered for a week. I don't know, right? But your true colors really come out, and he's just, I don't know. I don't even have words for how grateful I am. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, time's up. Can we please have a round of applause for our speakers? Thank you all for coming. I think more importantly, thank you all for just being here and being, sharing empathy, learning about, not parents or not, this is something that we all can learn from, and hopefully that we can express and share with everybody else. All right, thank you. Joanna has her book signing.
Oh, yes.